Sonic the Hedgehog was released in 1991 on the SEGA Genesis, and contrary to what many say, I don't think this game has aged poorly. This game is fantastic. The graphics are very beautiful for the time it was released, and it is a pixel art game from the 16-bit era. The graphics are beautiful even today. The songs are fantastic, and this game leaves a strong first impression on the person who plays. Let's start with the title screen, which is fully animated, giving Sonic expression and personality, giving a visual identity to the title screens of the franchise that remained in the SEGA Genesis games and that remains today in the new classic Sonic games. The games of that time had their story described in the manual, given technical limitations of the time. I read the American and Brazilian versions of the manual, which are the ones that I can understand, and the evil scientist, Dr. Evil Robotnik, is the person who is turning the little animals into robots. And only Sonic, with his power sneakers that make him run super fast, can stop the mad scientist's plans. This is a side-scroller platform game, a genre that became known with the classic Super Mario Bros. From 1986. The game has 6 zones, with 3 acts in each zone, and at the end of the third act we face a boss. Zones are the different scenarios that Sonic goes through in this game. The zones present in this game are Green Hill Zone, Marble Zone, Spring Yard Zone, Labyrinth Zone, Starlight Zone, Scrappy Brain Zone, and Final Zone. Green Hill Zone is the most striking area in the franchise. Lush green hills, the blue sky in contrast to the water in this paradisiacal setting, the checkerboard style, the walls, a slightly simpler level design to introduce the player, but which shows several facets through the acts of the game, with routes above and below the scene. And the zone is so memorable that it ended up returning several times in future titles in the franchise. The boss is very easy, just dodge the ball he carries and hit him. In the Genesis version and the emulated versions, it is possible to hit the boss several times before he starts attacking. The music is wonderful and has several layers that enhance the main melody. A true work of art, a super happy song that matches the theme of the level with a part that generates a little tension in the song. Which is then resolved and we return to the main theme with the compositions of Masato Nakamura. Very good music became a trademark of the franchise. The boss theme music is another work of art, a dark and threatening atmosphere. It looks like a soundtrack from a movie. This soundtrack is repeated in all bosses with the exception of the last one, which has its own soundtrack. No More Speed. The break in the zone makes many players who try to play this game in nowadays feel intimidated. There is lava all over the place, various internal sections, with graphics that are a little simpler, but look good in the art style of the game. However, the external parts are very beautiful. This zone has many platform sections, but it also has several secrets and shortcuts and has several hidden lives. Unfortunately, there are some waiting sections on top of blocks on the top of the lava that I don't know how to skip. This zone is very focused on platforming, and if you don't get used to the physics of this game, you will have to replay this area several times. This zone has another fantastic song, with a more tense and threatening atmosphere compared to the first zone. The track conveys the grandiosity of this stage and a feeling of anguish, which is perfectly reflected in the frustration of many players who were unable to pass this stage. To defeat the boss, just dodge and hit, but this time you have to jump across the lava chasm, so be careful. First zone with some pinball elements of the franchise. Unfortunately, we have a lot of waiting sections in the zone, with platforms that go up and down. But in contrast to the previous zone, the platforming parts are not as punishing, and we have some brief sections of speed in this area. In this area, we also see slightly simpler scenarios, but the balance in this zone is more positive, with a slightly better balance between speed and platform sections, with the negative point being the waiting sections on the giant blocks that go up and down. This zone has multiple routes too. This song has several nuances. It starts with a beat accompanying the melody, then we go to a very poppy beat, and we go to a happier section of the song. Another song that is interesting to pay attention to the different layers of the music. The zone boss drops down to grab a piece of the ground, so at that point you dodge and attack him. A simple concept like the other bosses. The nightmare of players of all ages, the zone that defines the term that the water level is equal to a bad level. This level is basically a slow version of the game. The scenarios are simpler, but I kinda like the visual aspect of this level. Unfortunately, the water as a mechanic ends up ruining the rhythm of the game. The idea of collecting bubbles to avoid running out of breath is brilliant, but other than that, it is an area with some simple puzzles and full of traps and punishing level design. This zone doesn't even have a traditional boss battle. It's just a chase after Dr. Robotnik that doesn't matter in the end. Because of these problems, this ended up becoming a very famous zone. Unfortunately, for the wrong reason. The music is incredible and gives up a happy vibe. The low notes that accompany the beat make the song quite full, so when we are running out of oxygen, it's distressing. Once again, an area with simple but beautiful scenery. A beautiful starry night, where we have an easier difficulty compared to the previous stages. In this area, there is a good division between speed sections and platform sections, not breaking the rhythm of the game. All speed sections are based purely on the physics of the game that are very good, without any type of automation on the part of the level, as we will see in later entries of the franchise. The boss in this area is very creative, and our objective is to hit him with the bombs he throws or hit him with a direct hit using the physics of the seesaws spread across the floor. This zone has one of my favorite songs from the game that completely matches the setting. The vibe is happy, each instrument simulated in the Genesis soundtrack plays its role with mastery in just the right measure, one of the best uses of the Genesis sound chip in my opinion. A large factory full of traps for the player to face. This is what we find in the first 2 acts of this challenging zone. Here the challenge begins with traps that are very difficult to avoid. This is the perfect time to abuse the ring collection system. And the third act is Labyrinth Zone 2. But the worst thing about this third act is the fact that bubbles are very far from each other and have to make perfect passage from one point to another so that Sonic's oxygen doesn't run out. There is a shortcut at the beginning of the level that makes things a lot easier, but you have to be quick to access it. The zone has no boss, and we are thrown straight into the final zone. The music is a masterpiece that mixes tension, very typical of one of the last zones, with a hint of science fiction soundtrack. The instrumentation uses various noises for the percussive part that combine perfectly with the environment illustrated with the stage. Final battle without rings. This one will be complicated, but actually not. This last boss is very easy. Just dodge the laser acorns he throws and be careful to not get crushed. And if you get scared, just stay in the corner and waiting for him to appear to attack you and dodge the laser balls. It's very easy, and I die several times because it's very easy and I underestimate the boss. The final zone music is dramatic and really sounds like the music from a climax and final battle of a movie, fulfilling its role as music for the final confrontation very well. And so we see the end of the game, which if you collected the 6 emeralds in the special stage, it will be a little different, and in my opinion, it's not worth getting the emeralds unless you are playing the Sonic 1 version of Sonic Origins and want to see the new animated cutscene, or want to do 100% of the game. These emeralds are obtained through special stages. The special stages are accessed through a giant ring that appears at the end of the stage. For this ring to appear, we need to reach the end of the stage with 50 rings or more. When entering the giant ring, Sonic is in his ball form, and we must guide him through a maze that keeps rotating until we find and collect the Chaos Emerald, avoiding the traps that make us leave the special stage. If you are playing the original version of the game, this is what you will receive as a reward for beating the game with all emeralds. The soundtrack of the special stage seems like a waltz to help you sleep. If it were a little softer, I would sleep during the gameplay. The melody is relaxing. The problem with this track is that it's a short loop because sometimes it takes you too long to get the emerald. Green Hill is the stage that represents very well what we can expect from the game, but unfortunately the difficulty increases a lot in the second zone, and this ends up being a problem with the game. The inconsistency in the difficulty of the stages. This is not just a bad thing about this game, but something about the time in which it was released. And we have to be fair when judging this game. It was Sonic's first game. The formula wasn't ready, and it built the foundation so that the other games of this era could shine. Even with the inconsistency in difficulty, attention is paid to the choice of the order of the zones, with Green Hill as a speed zone and Marble as a platform zone, always alternating, showing that the developers wanted to provide more variety in gameplay. Unfortunately, the platform challenges are much more complicated than the speed challenges, which doesn't give a good impression on people who play this title nowadays. Another negative highlight is Labyrinth, with the water mechanic that leaves the game practically in slow motion, making some platform challenges more tedious than they should be, in addition to being where the little song that drives us crazy originated. The bosses are very creative considering that is the first game in the franchise. They are very fun to face, they are not very difficult, and the last boss is one of the easiest of all. Despite its mistakes, Sonic 1 is a great classic of platform games and was the foundation of what would be the next games in the franchise. This game deserves more respect from the fans who criticize it. The game doesn't have the spin dash or the more modern movement of classic Sonic like the drop dash, but in my humble opinion the limitations of this first game have their charm, and if you want to play with the new additions, there is a version of the game available in the Sonic Origins package. This game was ported to several places, with very good versions and others not so much, but the original SEGA Genesis version remains a great experience today.